Let's turn over to the advisory, and many Australians hold serious concerns about debt nearing retirement. Let's get to Liam Shorte, financial planner and SMSF advisor from Sonas Wealth. Liam, the first thing I want to ask you is your reaction to, I spoke to Blake Briggs, the head of the Financial Services Council this week. He said Division 296 is, quote, fundamentally unfair. I'm sure that you are going to agree with that comment.
It's just badly written legislation. It's introducing things like unrealized gains, which really get people worried that is it the first step on moving those unrealized gains tax to personal holdings, to family trust holdings. So it's opening a gate which people don't trust governments not to close properly. And I don't mind the idea of taxing people with higher balances higher, and most people understand that the system needs to be sustainable, but it needs to be done in a proper way that's understandable and fair. And taxing unrealized gains and not indexing the limit is just a really poor policy.
All right, I don't think we're going to solve this issue today, so maybe we can go to some of the other anxiety that Australians are still feeling, despite having world's best, superannuation system, retirement saving system. There's still a lot of angst as people near retirement. Why is that, and how can we address it?
Yeah, look, more and more people are taking a lot more debt into retirement, and that's a real worry for them. I'm down in Melbourne today seeing clients. Melbourne hasn't seen that same growth in property prices that some of the other states have seen over the last couple of years or the last 5 years. So I've got clients who thought they would have their mortgages under control, thought the equity would have built up in their property, that they'd be fine for retirement. But we're seeing more and more people with $250,000 or $500,000 still in debt. And they're getting to that stage where they think, I want to retire, but can I? So we're trying to look at strategies for people and say to, one of their knee-jerk reactions is, I'm not going to put any extra into super because I want to pay down my debt. Well, the whole idea is use the system to your advantage. So what we get a lot of people to do as they approach 60 is to actually maximize what they're putting in and getting the deductions on their personal tax on what they put into super. And then after 60, either meet a conditional release or start a transition to retirement pension, and that they can take a lump sum out and pay off their loan. So it's all about using the system full to its max to get the best tax deductions, knowing that at 60 then you can access that money that you've saved to pay down the loan, and you're basically achieving probably a 5 or 10% saving on your mortgage at that stage.
Liam, we're tick-tocking towards the end of the financial year, and we've talked about the contributions you can make, but what is the advice if you're close to that $500,000 level in your superannuation fund?
Yeah, so if you're somebody who hasn't used their full limit every year for the last 5 years, if your balance is less than 500,000, you can use those unused balances to boost your tax deductions going forward. One of the tricks is if your balance is near the 500,000 and you have a spouse or a partner, you can actually still contribution split last year's contributions, so up to the 30th of June 2024, you can ask the government or the ATO to move your contributions that you made that year from your account across to your spouse's account. And then you could do the same for the 2025 ones on the 1st of July. So that would help you to keep your balance consistently below the 500,000 so that you can still take advantage of your unused contributions or using up your full 30,000 limit every year. Again, it's using the system, be smart about it. Try and find ways where you can make every dollar work a little bit harder, especially in volatile times like this.
Mm-hmm. How about super splitting?
Yeah, so the super splitting, that's part of what I said. Mm-hmm. And there's two reasons behind that. Often there's one member of a couple who's got a lower balance, and we're talking about this Division 296 coming in the future. We believe one of the best things you can be doing is making sure that you're evening up the spouse balances, so that just in case you do get anywhere near that 3 million, that you each have the 3 million limit, and that you don't have one spouse with 4 million and the other spouse with 500,000. So by super splitting each year, you're allowed to actually put a contribution put your contributions in, pays the 15% tax, and then you ask for those contributions to be moved across to your spouse. The other thing about spouses is you can also use what's called a spouse contribution. And that's where if your spouse is on a low income, and I really use this with young families where the mother is taking time off to take care of the children, the husband can still do $3,000 a year into the spouse's superannuation account, and the working spouse actually still gets a tax offset of $540. So the person doing it gets the benefit, and the person receiving it keeps their super building even when they're not working.
All right, I need to find one of those spouse things. What about setting up an SMSF to buy property, Liam?
Yeah, and look, just because interest rates have just started to drop, everybody's suddenly getting excited about, looking at properties again, and are they worthwhile? I'm seeing people getting overexcited. They're going to seminars, or they're being pushed into an SMSF to buy a property, and they're committing themselves to a property when they've only just set up the SMSF. When you set up the SMSF, that's not the final stage. The ATO has 28 days to decide whether or not you are a suitable trustee, whether they will actually approve you to be registered as an SMSF. And in a lot of cases, that can swing out to 56 or 72 days if you haven't answered the questions in time, or they haven't been able to get in touch with you. And this is one of the big issues we talked about earlier in the year. The ATO are phoning people. If people don't recognize the number, they're not answering. So the ATO will try.
Turn on the lights, Liam.
I'm in a serviced office today, so I don't have control. So please don't commit to a property until your super fund is fully set up. You have the rollovers from your existing funds. You have at least a deposit in there, because there are so many things that can go wrong along the way when doing rollovers. If there's a difference in your middle name, Anne with an E or Anne without an E, that can stop your rollover. So please don't rush into things. Do everything step by step. It's a long-term, huge investment. Why rush it and make mistakes? Because the big problem is if you get it wrong, you could go for double stamp duty, and we all hate stamp duty.